Hello, everyone. This is Al. You've been following my travel blog lately. Today, we'll talk about the Airbnb versus Booking.com versus a good old-fashioned hotel. What is better and when? Well, as we all know, Airbnb is a company that allows landlords to rent out their apartment to just about anybody. Prices vary from dirt cheap to prohibitively expensive. It depends on where you are, what you're doing, and what you're looking to do. So, for instance, when I went to Mexico, I ended up paying $600 a month with a private landlord to be in Puerto Vallarta near the beach. On Airbnb, I could have found a price that's a little better. Why is that? Well, because uh, anybody on Airbnb can put out their apartment on Airbnb. There is a lot of competition for clients. In Brazil, I found the exact same experience. Now, when I was in Spain, on the other hand, it's not so easy that at that point I was actually better off finding a private landlord. In Malaga, I found an apartment for about $900 a month, consistent all year round, and I was lucky because of the pandemic. Prices were low. On the Airbnb, however, I could not easily find something that cheap. However, once we were deep into the pandemic, deep into the economic crisis in Spain, then of course the Airbnb prices have gone down. In Serbia, however, in Belgrade, I had no issue finding apartments for $600 to $700 a month on Airbnb. Montenegro, the same. Even in the high season, though, you got to book a little bit ahead of time. Brazil is tricky. Brazil is interesting. Here, there is just such a broad supply, such an abundance of houses that you can rent on Airbnb that I rarely have a problem finding something affordable. No, except maybe deep in the high season in the super tourist areas. But then all you need to do is move to a less well-known area, and again, you have budget-friendly prices. Though you've got to be careful. If you're in the south of Brazil, you're fine. Safety is not a big issue, especially if you're in Santa Catarina. Now, on the other hand, if you are in Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, the next thing you know is that and if your affordably priced apartment on Airbnb is going to be in a favela. In fact, I did that in the Rio de Janeiro area. I went to Areal do Cabo, 2 hours north of the capital, Rio de Janeiro, and lo and behold, the apartment that I found, nice apartment, $20 a night, is actually in a favela. It's the Brazilian equivalent of a marginalized community, where in fact they shoot up with the police just may or may not happen. So you better not make any trouble. You better not make any noise. You better not argue with anybody. It's not that the favela dwellers are going to harm you, but you don't want to have a misunderstanding. See, if the police show up to a favela, there could be a shootout, which is why people who live in the favelas are really careful not to start any trouble. You know, they look out for the people who live there. But you got to know the social norms. You got to know the social mores. You got to know what to expect. And if you get yourself knee deep into that kind of a mess, well, I think you're better off going to Booking.com or just going to a hotel. In fact, that's what I would recommend for a for any area where there are safety issues. Now, if safety is not an issue, I'd say try Airbnb first. Now, Keith, what was your experience booking hotels in Portugal and Holland? Why didn't you use Airbnb? And are you having second thoughts about the way you've done things?
Well, a lot of this comes down to the duration of your stay. Like frequently, when I travel outside of the United States, it's for relatively short stays. If I were going to stay for longer periods of time, I would normally look into something like Airbnb because ultimately you're going to be paying a lot lower prices than if you're staying in a hotel. Hotels, just like in the United States, if you rent a hotel room year round, you're going to pay a lot more money for housing than if you rent a normal apartment or even rent a house. And it's like that overseas as well and outside the United States. But it all depends on how long you're going to stay and how much travel you're going to be doing. You know, I've been going to Europe. I'm in my 50s now. I've been going to Europe since I was in my 20s, and I've also spent time in Latin America as well. And when I was younger, I used to stay in places that were as cheap as possible. I was more interested in cost effectiveness. And that's true of younger travelers as well. And I frequently stayed in hostels. In fact, I had an extended stay in the Netherlands once where I lived in a hostel where the place I was staying was basically an open room with about 20 bunk beds in it. So it was almost like a college dorm, maybe not even quite on that level. And then there's a shared bathroom and all of that kind of stuff. Now, the older you get, the less tolerance you tend to have for those kinds of living conditions. And I have found that it's easy to find fairly cheap hotels in a lot of European cities. For instance, the last time I was in Portugal, I was in the city of Porto, and there I was staying in a hotel that was fairly nice. I mean, the hotel room was basically like a miniature apartment, and I ended up paying. I think for everything it came down to about $80 a night, which is very cheap for a high quality hotel. One mistake that I made in one of my recent European visits is that I was just looking for cost effectiveness. And I ended up getting a place in Amsterdam that was basically just a glorified hostel. I had my own room, but with very few amenities. There was no central heating and air. They did have a portable plug-in fan and portable air conditioner, and then the bathroom was in the hallway. It was a public shower, public bathroom in the hallway. So that was fairly sparse living conditions, and the cost there, even though it was relatively cheap compared to a hotel, the cost was still about 60% greater. Well, no, let's see. When I was in Portugal, I was probably paying about 60% what I was paying in Amsterdam for much lower quality living conditions when I was in Amsterdam. So it's important to shop around when you're looking for housing in any international location. One problem with Amsterdam is that it's such a major international city, and it's such a major tourism center that things by nature there are expensive. There's also a shortage of housing. It's like some of the American cities where there's a shortage of housing. So things by nature they're going to be expensive. So you've really got to look hard to get a good deal. If you're going to live in a country like the Netherlands, I would suggest not living in Amsterdam or in The Hague or in Rotterdam, one of the major cities. I would suggest living in a smaller city, as long as you're able to do that, relative to your work situation and all of that. But whether a lot of your decision about where you're going to stay when you go to a foreign country is going to be dependent on all these different things: how long you're going to be there, what kind of amenities you want, the place that you're living, cost effectiveness. You've got to weigh all these different issues against each other.
Yeah, so sum it up: cost effectiveness, availability of housing, safety. If you are in Europe, especially Northern Europe, you have to deal with a housing crisis. There's a shortage of available housing, Amsterdam especially. Now, on the other hand, if you're in Spain, it's still a problem, but not as much of a problem. Portugal is overrun. But here, though, in Portugal, I'd say try Airbnb first. And remember, you're going to get a discount, like 30-40% off if you stay for a whole month on Airbnb. Try it. That's going to save you a lot of trouble. It's going to be easier than dealing with landlords who want to deposit for 3 to 4 months. And that's something to definitely look into. However, if safety is not an issue, if safety is an issue, then you better look at a hotel first. Look up Booking.com, and once you get a feel of the area and you know where you may be staying, look into Airbnb's monthly discount. You've got to see how much money you could save with that. Okay, Keith, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, there's a lot of different websites where you can look for housing assistance or lodging assistance in other places. For example, there's a website that I've used for years called hotels.com, and they will give you an overview of what's available, and they'll have photographs of the hotels and a list of their amenities and things like that, as well as the pricing and all of these kinds of things. So that's a good site to use as well. Booking.com is good, hotels.com. Certainly for extended stays, I would also recommend Airbnb. Airbnb, you're going to get a lot better deal in terms of cost effectiveness, certainly. Safety, of course, is a paramount concern. That's going to vary a lot depending on where you're going. Usually, when I've gone to Latin America, depending on the duration of the stay, I've stayed at hotels simply because they're safer. If I were going to be a permanent resident in some of the Latin American countries, I would
Yeah.
be more concerned about safety, and I would have to certainly seek out housing, cautiously.
Safety is definitely a primary issue, but as I said, first try hotel, and then once you know the lay of the land, you can look into getting an Airbnb. All right, guys, thanks so much. We'll be in touch.